Hello, everyone. This is recording number 11 for Early Stoic Philosophy, a class on Stoic logic, physics, and ethics. And today I want to talk about Stoic theory of the emotions. That is one of the dimensions of Stoic philosophy that are most widely known and debated in the 1980s and 90s when early Stoic philosophy was kind of rediscovered. That was one of the themes that really captured people's interest. And one of the reasons for that was that people in philosophy of mind and in psychology were at the time quite interested in a type of theory that is called cognitivism about the emotions. And roughly that means that an emotion either essentially involves a judgment or actually is a judgment. Now, in exploring that type of theory, it seemed to philosophers that maybe the Stoics are ancestors of that approach, because it does seem that the Stoics define emotions as judgments. And that kind of made people turn back to the Stoics and look more closely at what is it that they are saying. Now, once that was being done, it turned out that there is a pretty big difference between what the Stoics are saying and what we might be inclined to think if today we are cognitivists. Namely, the Stoics not only say that the emotions are judgments, they also say that one shouldn't have emotions. Or in other words, as we already saw, they often express these normative ideals in terms of what the wise person does. They say the wise person doesn't have emotions. The Greek term here is pathos, and that is sometimes also translated as passion, because sometimes it seems to scholars that, well, emotion is maybe not as strong a term as we need here, and maybe passion expresses more vividly that for the Stoics, an emotion is a tumultuous state of mind. But I'm going to stick with the more general term emotion, because it seems to me that when we speak of passions, that suggests that the Stoics dismiss only some subset of the emotions. And that would be misleading. The Stoics do hold the quite radical view that one shouldn't have emotions. Now, when scholars turn to that view and try to make sense of it, the first consideration was, well, are they genuinely saying that a wise person, a person with knowledge and virtue, such a person has no affective mental life? That would seem truly counterintuitive and just impossible. Now, that is not what the Stoics are saying. The Stoics are saying that emotions are a type of mental state that is so tumultuous that we really ought not to have it, but we ought to replace it with a different kind of affective mental state called rational feelings or good feelings, eupatheiai. And examples of that would be that the wise person is generous. She looks with joy at good things that happen. She is cautious, and so on and so forth. So the Stoic position, even though it is radical, is not as radical as to say that a wise person has no affective mental states. Now, once that is kind of taken care of, as it were, then the question still remains, well, if emotions are judgments, why is it that we shouldn't have emotions? And one thought that scholars explored was, is it maybe because emotions are false judgments? And that is a fairly prominent view in the literature. But I would like to use this recording in order to call it into question and to suggest that it would be much better if we had a reconstruction of the Stoic theory that does not appeal to falsity. And why would that be better? Because falsity doesn't come up when the Stoics discuss emotions as judgments. When they spell out the definition of emotions as judgments, they say that an emotion is a fresh opinion, doxa, and that it is a weak supposition or assumption, a weak instance of holding something to be true. So the predicates here are fresh and weak, but not false. And it would be preferable, I want to suggest, if we had a reconstruction that kind of attends to that and that doesn't appeal to falsity, but instead to an opinion being fresh and weak. And that, of course, is a challenge because we need to ask, what does that mean? Now, I want to pursue that question by looking at two examples. Here's the first example. A person walks along a path and here's a snake and she is scared. Now, for the Stoics, to be scared is going to be an assent to an impression. That is what a judgment is. And in fact, it is going to be a series of assents to a series of impressions. One impression is just, as it were, descriptive. There's a snake. One impression is going to be evaluative. That's dangerous. Another impression is going to be kind of predictive and evaluative. The snake is going to bite me, and that is horrible. And yet another impression is going to describe some kind of action. I've got to get away. So presumably the person who is scared assents to all of that. And that is what it is to be scared, according to that definition of the Stoics. Now, in this example, there is falsity, at least according to the Stoics, because they would say that it is a mistake to think that it is bad to be bitten by the snake or a disaster or terrible. Rather, we should think that it is reasonably dispreferred. And that goes back to this distinction that we studied last week between the valuable on the one hand and the good on the other hand. Valuable, such as health, is reasonably preferred, and only virtue is good. So in the light of that distinction, there is in fact a mistake here. Namely, the person thinks, it is terrible, it is a disaster, it is bad if the snake is going to bite me. But here's another example, and that illustrates that falsity is in fact not essential to what's going on in the mind of a person who has an emotion. So in that second example, imagine an agent who thinks that she betrayed her friend. She thinks that she's not a good person on account of having betrayed her friend, because being a bad friend is a bad thing, is a serious thing. So she thinks that she is not a good person, that she falls short of being virtuous, and that that is a bad thing, and that she somehow must remedy this. And again, you see there's kind of descriptive dimensions here. There are evaluative dimensions, and there is a plan of action, and she needs to remedy this. But there is no falsity. All of this, according to the Stoics, would be true. Well, it is a terrible thing, according to the Stoics, not to be a good person, because virtue is the only thing that is good. And that is something that one ought to remedy. So falsity doesn't seem to be the issue. Then what is the issue? Now, here are a few thoughts about what fresh and weak may mean. And that is kind of the conclusion of this recording. And I kind of just want to invite the question to think more about what is it that is the problem with those opinions that the Stoics say emotions are. Now, fresh seems to mean that one forms this opinion, as it were, now at a given moment. So now the person thinks, I fall short of being virtuous. Or now the person thinks, there's a dangerous snake. The snake's going to bite me. That is terrible. And the Stoics think that this kind of freshness of the emotion sort of sets off the tumultuous movement in the mind. But then they also use this predicate weak. And we saw that predicate already when we studied the difference between knowledge on the one hand and opinion, doxa on the other hand. We saw that for the Stoics, in fact, all opinions are weak in the sense of changeable. An opinion, a doxa, is not a piece of knowledge and is not integrated in a kind of stable set of views about the world, all of which support each other. Rather, it is often a kind of isolated piece of holding something to be true, which one may very well give up again. And the Stoics think that that often happens to us. If we progress towards virtue, then we may think at a moment, it is terrible not to be a virtuous person. But then, given that we are not virtuous, we may also tell ourselves a story about it and think, well, it's not so bad after all. And maybe there is some kind of justification. We talk ourselves into a somewhat kind of better version of things. And so that means that the view that we have, according to which it is a terrible thing not to be a good person, is not a piece of knowledge. It is merely an opinion, a doxa. And that makes it inherently unstable. So on that reconstruction, really what is bad about the kind of judgment that an emotion is that it is an opinion, a doxa. And I want to end the recording by suggesting that maybe the Stoics are putting their finger on something quite interesting here, that it could be that emotions, if and insofar as they involve judgments that have a distinctive kind of instability and changeability.